On January 30th, 2026, the United States Department of Justice released what may be the largest single document drop in American legal history, over 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, 180,000 images, all connected to one man, Jeffrey Epstein. Within 24 hours, a top government official in Europe had already resigned, and that's just the beginning. And this is unsealed.
To understand what just happened, we need to go back a few months. For years, the public demanded answers about the Epstein case. Who knew what? Who was involved? And why was only one person, Ghislaine Maxwell, ever convicted? On November 18, 2025, the U.S. House of Representatives voted 427-1 to pass the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The Senate approved it unanimously. President Trump signed it the very next day. The law gave the Department of Justice exactly 30 days to release all unclassified records from the Epstein and Maxwell investigations. That deadline was December 19th, and the DOJ missed it. When the deadline hit, the Justice Department released only a fraction of the files, a few thousand documents, heavily redacted. Over 500 pages were completely blacked out. But here's where it gets interesting. The digital redactions were done poorly. Within days, members of the public figured out how to uncover the blacked-out content. Information the government had tried to hide was now visible to anyone with a computer. By early January, less than 1% of the total files had been released. Congress was furious. Both Democrats and Republicans demanded answers. The pressure was building. Then on January 30th, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche held a press conference. He announced the release of over 3 million additional pages, along with 2,000 videos and 180,000 images. He said more than 500 attorneys had worked through weekends and holidays to review the material. He described the total volume as, quote, 2 Eiffel Towers of pages. Blanche stated that this release brought the DOJ into full compliance with the Transparency Act. He called it the final major release, but not everyone agrees. The DOJ itself identified over 6 million pages as potentially relevant. They released roughly half. Democratic lawmakers immediately challenged this, calling it a violation of the law. Representative Ro Khanna said, and I'm paraphrasing, that failing to release these files only protects powerful individuals and damages public trust. So what's actually in these files? First, the names. The documents contain thousands of references to some of the most powerful people in the world. President Trump's name appears thousands of times, though the vast majority are in news articles and emails where others are discussing him. The DOJ noted that some claims about the president in the files are, their words, unfounded. Former President Bill Clinton appears in emails and depositions. When Epstein was asked about Clinton under oath, he invoked the Fifth Amendment on every single question. Former Prince Andrew appears hundreds of times in Epstein's private emails. In one exchange, Epstein appeared to arrange a date for him, describing a woman as, quote, 26, Russian, clever, beautiful. Elon Musk shows up in emails from 2014 where Epstein repeatedly invited him to his private island. Musk has stated that he declined those invitations. Steve Bannon exchanged hundreds of texts with Epstein and received gifts including an Apple Watch. Now, and this is critical, being mentioned in these files does not mean someone committed a crime. These documents include unverified tips, gossip, news clippings, and secondhand information. The DOJ itself warned that the files may contain, quote, fake or falsely submitted material. Beyond the famous names, the files reveal something arguably more important: how the investigations actually worked and where they failed. Newly released FBI interview records show detailed statements from witnesses describing an organized operation, private planes, multiple residences across countries, modeling agencies used as recruitment fronts, and extensive surveillance systems inside Epstein's properties. One employee at Epstein's Florida estate told the FBI that his duties included fanning $100 bills on a table near Epstein's bed, placing a gun between the mattresses, and cleaning up after frequent encounters with young women. The files also include a draft indictment from 2007, never made public until now. It laid out 60 criminal charges against Epstein and 3 assistants. Prosecutors were ready to go. But instead, U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta signed a plea deal that let Epstein serve just 13 months with daily work release. An internal FBI document created 5 days after Epstein's death in 2019 lists 9 people as family and associates, with 8 labeled as co-conspirators. Most names are redacted. Only Maxwell and modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel are visible. That means the FBI knew there were others, and yet only Maxwell was ever charged. The impact of this release went global almost immediately. In Slovakia, Prime Minister Robert Fico accepted the resignation of his national security advisor, Miroslav Lajčák. A former foreign minister and former president of the UN General Assembly appeared in Epstein's emails. He was invited to dinners and meetings in 2018. He hasn't been accused of wrongdoing, but the political pressure was too much. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Keir Starmer publicly suggested that former Prince Andrew should cooperate with American investigators. Andrew has so far ignored a request from the U.S. House Oversight Committee for a formal interview about his relationship with Epstein. And in the United States, questions are mounting about Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. Emails suggest he visited Epstein's island for lunch, years after he publicly claimed to have cut off contact. These files aren't just American news, they're reshaping politics across the world. But the release has also caused serious harm. Attorneys representing hundreds of Epstein survivors say that names and identifying information of victims appeared unredacted in the documents, including women whose identities had never been publicly connected to the case. Attorney Brad Edwards, who has represented Epstein's victims for over 20 years, called it, quote, literally thousands of mistakes. The DOJ had promised that victim information would be protected. Over 500 attorneys were supposedly reviewing the material for exactly this purpose, and yet survivors are now being exposed, while the identities of potential co-conspirators remain hidden behind redaction bars. This is a failure that cannot be understated, and at Unsealed we want to be clear. We will never identify or name any victim in our coverage. That is a line we will not cross. So what's still out there? The DOJ identified over 6 million pages as potentially responsive to the Transparency Act. They released roughly half. The rest, they say, includes duplicates, unrelated material, and documents protected by legal privilege. But lawmakers aren't buying it. Members of the House Judiciary Committee sent an urgent letter demanding to see the full files. They want to know why 3 million pages are being withheld. Deputy AG Blanche has insisted there is no secret list of clients, no hidden tranche of explosive documents. But a CNN poll from January found that 2/3 of Americans believe the government is deliberately withholding information. The gap between what the government says and what the public believes has never been wider. This is the biggest document release in the history of the Epstein case, and we are just beginning to go through it. In upcoming episodes, we'll trace how Epstein built his empire, who Ghislaine Maxwell really was, how the justice system failed in 2008, and why, after millions of pages, only one person has ever been convicted. If you want to stay informed as new findings emerge, subscribe to Unsealed and turn on notifications. We're covering this story from beginning to end. And remember, the truth doesn't stay sealed forever.